and the shareholder value that needs to be maximized is the evil one, I guess. It encourages totally the wrong farming practices. The regenerative farmers understand that they're just custodians of the land and that they need to return it to God one day in the same condition that it was received. In the States, done extensive studies on the difference between the nutrients of a caged hen's egg versus a pasture outdoor reared egg. And in some studies, it went as high as 400% higher in nutrients. Then I'm a happy hen and I will make happy eggs. And happy eggs make happy people. And it's a nice circle of life. When you go to the fancy bakers in town, you know, these guys that cater for the top 5-star hotels and they need to bake properly decent products, they'll come in and buy trolleys of our eggs because it just makes the end product better. Well, the first thing we look for is what the retailers of 100 years ago looked for, and that was a nice thick level of cream on top of the milk. That is where the fats are. That is where the good probiotics are. That is where the health is and the nutrients are. There's such an upside of incentivizing nutrient-dense good food. It would allow them to put all those tax dollars that they're spending on hospitals to something else. I mean, there's so many other places that you could redeploy cash if you could get the average health level higher than it is now.
Greetings, seekers of ancient wisdom. We are back again with an amazing guest, Gary Jackson, the founder of Jackson's Real Food Market. Gary, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Great to be back.
We are so glad that you are back because we are going to talk about something very relevant for people. We're talking about good farming practices because a lot of the farmers don't actually have good farming practices. They have monoculture. They only plant one single plant. They use a lot of fertilizers, which damages the soil. They plow the soil, which I understand also damages the soil. They use pesticides. I mean, there's so much wrong with the current way most farmers are farming. So, Gary, tell us a little bit about what you think are good farming practices that people should follow.
Great, Deepak, thanks. Let me start by explaining what we would call an amazing farmer without labeling that farmer anything specific. So if a farmer had zero inputs from outside, in other words, nothing from the outside world gets brought into the farm, and that we mean chemicals and pesticides and foreign manure or any other input, and not even seeds, because a real farmer would harvest their own seeds. So that farmer would then grow cover crops for the livestock, and that farmer would feed his or her livestock with the cover crops, whether it's sweet peas or whether it's soya. There's about 40 different cover crops that livestock absolutely love. Then the animals would be roam, and we call this high density, which is very, very different to, we would call it feedlot. Feedlot is the absolute worst in our mind, and what I'm describing is the absolute best. So what the farmer does then is he looks out at his pasture and he starts on one side and he uses a small little thin electric cable that just keeps the animals that can sense that there's an electric current, and he or she keeps them in a camp, and they graze for a full day on this camp. And then tomorrow we move up and they graze again. And so you carry on going until you get to the end of the farm, and then you come back the other way down. So each piece is only grazed like once every 3 months, more or less. So you're giving that soil time to recover, or the grasslands time to recover. And then what you do is, once the cows move, you can move goat, you can move sheep, you can move chicken behind that, because the magic that's happening on the field is lots of nitrogen being put onto that field from the urination of the livestock, and the cow pats, or the poo that comes out of the animals, goes into the soil. The hooves are then working that soil and massaging earth, basically, and getting everything in. And it's revitalizing, or giving that soil a proper shot in the arm. The hoof marks make dents in the ground, and that's perfect for grasslands, because the grass seeds, they just blow across the earth. It's such a blessing that these multi-species grasses will just hover around in the sky and land. And then when the next rains come, you've got this seed in this little groove, and it germinates. And so the grassland regenerates. And so if a farm does that, uh, there's a whole bunch of things happening um, on that farm. And Deepak, the best way to explain it is, we're looking at biodiversity. So what would happen then is, these animals would be eating a whole range of indigenous grasses, and each size animal grazes at a different level. So the cow would take off the top, and then the goat and the sheep would chew a little bit further down, and then the hens would pick the larvae in the cow pats, and it would also pick the green shoots. So what's then happening is, the cow's biome in its tummy is so happy, because it's getting a diversity of grasses, and it's able to convert that into energy, and that keeps that animal alive and growing. So that's the one part. The other part is the magic, and that's the soil. What's happening now is, these grasses are growing these deep roots, and these roots are going into the earth and spreading left and right laterally, and literally, and I'm going to say this in layman's terms because it's easier to understand, it's sucking up nutrients. Okay, and over time, the soil is being regenerated every single time those animals move across that little piece. And that soil, or the topsoil, is just getting such a boost of um, amino acids, vitamins, phytonutrients. It's just an absolute glory to see. And when you drive past one of these farms in the middle of winter in the Free State, you will see a grass patch across a regenerative farmer's land that looks lush and absolutely gorgeous, almost looks like a carpet. And you would then look across to a monoculture farmer, and their farm would look very different. So what they would do, and we're not even talking about a feedlot farmer, we're talking about a free range farmer, where they've got this massive piece of land, they let the cows out, and the cows just graze and go where they like. And I must be honest, when I started my real food journey, I thought that was the ultimate in farming, only to realize that it's actually not good for the soil, because, or the grass, they overgraze in one area, they pull up, every little bit of grass, and then you get these patches of dust and hard clay-like soil. And so if you had to fly over the top or take a drone across, you wouldn't see a beautiful lush pasture. You're going to see patches all over the place. And overgrazing kills grass, and it's much better to contain your animals like our ancestors did in ancient times. They moved their cattle every single day. They never stayed on the same spot and just relaxed. They were on the move the whole time. And that's what we're trying to emulate here. But obviously, we now have fences and we have roads that contain these animals. So we've almost got to simulate the great herds of Africa and do that on a smaller scale across a regenerative farm. The whole point about not plowing is huge, and it did take me quite a while to understand, because when you meet a farmer, the first thing they tell you about is their tractor and how they love driving and plowing the soil. And it's called no-till. Now, no-till farming is essential because these deep plows that we've used in mono agriculture go into the soil quite deep, and they literally slice through the root system. Uh, Underneath the soil, there's this amazing network of fungi, of insect life, of worm life, of plant matter. There's so much going on. There are trillions and trillions of organisms that are below the soil, and they're all creating air pathways because that's what soil needs. So you would have moles, you would have gerbils, you would have a whole lot of uh, an ecosystem of animals that are alive, that are working the soil and doing our work for us. So, to explain, a dung beetle would break down dung and then dig holes and bring it back into the soil. A dung beetle is an amazing being, because they really are doing all the work that needs to be done. They're literally doing God's work because they are bringing it in. And then you get ants, and then you get termites, and then you get worms. They all have a role to play in the degradation of dung and pulling it into the soil, because that's where the nutrients are. So next time you look at a field that's lush and green, you will know, and you have to know, that there are millions of miracles happening right before your eyes. And Deepak, the main thing is that the animal is happy, the animal is not disturbed, the animal is eating like as if they were in a five-star restaurant. They have up to 40 different types of grasses. So that's a buffet, basically. And they can walk through this buffet of 40 dishes and choose the ones that they want for that day. And cows are amazing. They will only eat either the sour or the sweet grasses, or comfrey if their tummies aren't feeling great. And so they regulate and balance their biomes for maximum nutrient uptake. And that's what it's about. So, what's happening here is that the nutrients are going into the soil, and the soil is becoming nutrient rich. So when you grow anything on that field, uh, then you are going to be assured that whatever carrot or potato you grow will be highly nutrient dense, because that root system is bringing all these different minerals and amino acids into the actual produce. And then the cow's tummy is feeling fantastic because they're balancing, they're happy, they're healthy. Our farmers don't even have vets. That there's no such thing as a need for a vet. They haven't come across a needle ever, and they would never do that. So these animals are so healthy, and they literally have such good immunities that they heal themselves. So these animals are um, amazing beings, and they grow to an older age. They don't, like in a feedlot, get processed or slaughtered at an early age, like a teenager, um, because that's essentially what happens. These cows grow out. So why is it important that a farmer farms in this way? Well, it's all about the lifespan of a cow. What determines the lifespan of a cow is its teeth and its ability uh, to chew its grasses and to digest. So it needs to start off on grass, on pasture, and end off on pasture. And the best, healthiest, most highly nutrient dense protein will come from a farm that practices in this way. So you have a short lifespan because a cow uh, starts getting flat teeth over the years. And once their teeth have worn, they literally can eat and chew, but they can't mash the grass into an absorbable format. So it goes in one end, out the other end, and your cow starts losing weight, and your cow will eventually just perish on its own. So at that point, before it starts losing weight, that's when the animals get processed, because that's when they're absolutely at their optimum, and the village then enjoys the fruit that comes from the cow in the form of amazingly nutrient dense protein. Now, the next phase is the processing and slaughtering of the animal. Our preference is that the animal is slaughtered on the farm, one at a time only, one per day, you could say, or one in the morning, one in the afternoon, on the farm, put into refrigeration right there on the farm, and then processed also on the farm and packed. So, so why is this so important to us, Deepak? It's about transportation. The distance that animals are moved from farm to abattoir is absolutely shocking. You can just imagine if you've been living in a five-star hotel all your life and you get put on the back of a bakkie in a cage and driven, across South Africa, or driven for 3-4 hours, you're going to end up being real stressed. And so that will shoot your pH levels up, and that would result in meat that's subprime, and you've gone through all this effort. And at the end of the day, you have this subprime pH, and that final product is not doing justice to that animal's life. So, in a nutshell, that's our perfect farmer.
That's cool. So you explained quite a lot of detail, and this is mainly for livestock farming. So I'm curious to understand because farmers are profit driven, and a lot of the big farmers, they have loans from the banks, and the banks end up dictating to the farmer how they should farm, what they should feed the livestock. Hormones. I mean, people talk about the hormones that these animals are getting pumped with. And is this regenerative type of farming that you're talking about, is it profitable for a farmer, or is it difficult? I mean, I'm just trying to understand why farmers are going the mainstream way, which sounds terrible on all fronts. Is it just a profit reason, or is there something else you think?
It's definitely the profit motive. And I would answer you like this. I would say that farmers uh, used to farm like this. Everybody farmed like this until we started looking at using the fields to grow the food to feed the cows. So now we're doing it differently. We're not giving our cows grain. We're letting them eat for free, you could say, because you're not buying those cover crops. You're not buying food, and that's your massive thing that messes up big business and big factory farms, because the formula that they use is, what do I feed this cow to get it to put on as many kilograms as possible in the shortest space of time, and that spits out something nasty. So yes, the greed is there, and the shareholder value that needs to be maximized is the evil one, I guess. It encourages totally the wrong farming practices without regard for animal cruelty levels. So is it profitable? Well, It is. But once you've gone to monocrop farming or feedlot farming, to convert takes a lot of willpower, because you have to study, you have to understand, you really do need to be a scientist of your own soil, and there's some hard work behind it. But you know what? The regenerative farmers understand that they're just custodians of the land, and that they need to return it to God one day in the same condition that it was received. And it was received Garden of Eden style, where everything was fertile and fruiting, and it was just perfect. And so the farmers that can farm from the heart and from that place, they will fight their way through the conversion period. It could be 1 2 years, it depends. um, and then uh, it is profitable, because it's low input farming. So no need for vets, no need for dips, no need for any tick baths. The birds, animals, and the insects take care of themselves. You leave them all alone, and they basically work in harmony. Once you've got the balance right, and I think that's the big one. You've got to fight hard until you get back into nature's rhythms and nature's um, balance. And once you get to that point, the farming's actually the easy part. It doesn't necessarily mean more labor. It really just the animal then just becomes a lawnmower, really, and a beautiful lawnmower that is converting itself into one of the highest nutrient dense omega-3 filled proteins. So let me give you two examples of profitable farmers. And it's not all about livestock. We're talking about people that are doing crops. The same principle applies, is that you rotate your crops, you grow cover crops, you look after the soil, you mulch, you bring back nature to your lands. And once you do that, your crops become abundant, your yields grow more than a monocrop farmer, and you literally run a better profit. It's a fact that down in Stellenbosch, Johan Reinecker, who's had or has the first biodynamic uh, wine farm, is like, biodynamic is like a huge step forward. It's from organic. It's really nothing on the farm, nothing off the farm. Everything gets decomposed, everything gets used, and what's incredible is that he believes that his wine should be sold, but not even at a premium. So he doesn't sell his wine. He has wines that are at a premium, but his bulk is a table, affordable wine that he believes people should be able to enjoy a good organic wine. And even with him not fighting for that premium, he's still way ahead of the other farmers that are crop spraying and doing all these modern techniques. And yeah, he's and that profit allows him to grow more, farm more, and he's quite an amazing guy. He will only harvest when the moon is in a certain area. He will take cow horns and fill them with his best soil, um, and he will put those cow horns into the ground. He will prune based on astrology. He has lots of modality, and this isn't something that is weird. This is exactly what the ancestors did. They did exactly these things, and he's just emulating it, and he's ending up with a profitable farm. Um, and so, yes, in the short term, it would be tricky, but your compound effect, once you've passed that stage of balance, it just carries on and on and on. And nature gives you what you need. And, that's what it is. Is it easy to do it on a massive scale if you think about livestock? Well, possibly not. The numbers probably don't work. But we're looking at a future world where small farmers all contribute to whatever the demand is. So you don't have one feedlot that's owned by one company that monopolizes the thing. We rather looking at a co-op type effort where all farmers in a certain area are running the same regenerative practices. Retailers like ourselves will buy from those farmers, and yes, we will make sure that we are the same price as a feedlot pack of meat on the shelf, or if slightly higher, maybe 10%, because the idea is to keep the farmer very happy, because once he's happy and he's getting a premium for that extra effort, then the economy's balance, and it's sometimes call it, it's a kingdom economy. We all share and we all balance out, and every party in the supply chain is looked after and happy, and that's sustainable for many, many generations.
So I love that one example you showed me when I came to one of your talks and you took some eggs. You took eggs from a normal supermarket and you took your eggs and you broke them onto a plate and you showed us that your eggs were much more sturdy, right? I mean, you could like tap the egg, the yellow part, and it would take a long time before it actually, broke and spread all over the place. And this was exactly as you explained. The chickens are eating more diverse food. They're walking out in the field. They're free range, proper free range. Not like the free range that some people claim. And you can see that in the quality of their eggs. Their eggs were just so much higher quality, right? Because they were more sturdy. They had a nice color. You could actually visually see that they looked more consistent and the color was richer. And I mean, I'm sure this is the same case with the meat as well, right? I guess it's not easy to test like we did the eggs, but the meat would also be higher quality. And this is where you're explaining the higher protein content, more variety of amino acids, less hormones, etc. But maybe talk about the eggs because I was fascinated about that little experiment that you did. Anyone can really do this in their own homes.
So, in fact, they have in the States done extensive studies on the difference between a caged hen, the nutrients of a caged hen's egg, versus a pasture outdoor reared egg. And in some studies, it went as high as 400% higher in nutrients. Let's say the average was 300%. For 20 cents more an egg or 30 cents more an egg, you're getting 300% more nutrients. So, it's like getting a Duracell battery and comparing it to one of these Chinese knockoffs that you've got to keep replacing, whereas the Duracell battery would work for a year sometimes. So that's the power of regenerative farming. And it just does, it's really not rocket science. It's pretty simple. You let the chicken out in the field, you let them dust bath, you let them drink when they want, you let them eat what they want, when they want, and they make sure that they get different grasses, they get bugs, they will nibble on a worm, and that diet would make their tummies so diverse and so healthy that whatever they eat will get absorbed into their system and not pass through. So the percentage of nutrients that pass through a animal that's raised on a regenerative farm is very, very high. So it'll retain the nutrients from the soil and the land and only leave what's really waste. And that truly is waste. But again, it's not waste because the nitrogen and all of that, as I explained earlier, is going into the soil. So from an egg point of view, it's a simple formula. If you make me happy, you exercise me, you give me a good diet, and you keep me stimulated, and you allow me to sleep the way I want to sleep, which is on my two legs roosting, not lying flat, then I'm a happy hen and I will make happy eggs. And happy eggs make happy people. And it's a nice circle of life. It just perpetuates. And, like you said, the cell membranes are strong. And why is that? Well, the food is more absorbable by a human because your food recognizes this matter that you're eating as wow, this is what a human wants, and this is what my cells need. And the human being needs to eat matter that will not just pass through their system or spike their sugars, but be bioavailable into their cell matter. And when the cells are strong, the eggs are strong. And so it goes on. You can't emulate nature. And yes, the farmers that use caged hens try putting calcium in their food. Then they try putting geraniums in their, or beetroot dust to make the eggs look brighter. But at the end of the day, it's all kind of greenwashing, or it's all window framing. What you really want is what we're looking for, and that customers must buy based on nutrients. The nutrient value of an egg should determine the price of the egg, and not the kilos or the grammage of an egg, or how many kilos of meat you get off a farm. That's wrong, and that isn't going to perpetuate the, the the human race in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a bit of research into chicken farming, and the current mainstream way of farming chickens is from when a chick hatches till I think 6 weeks is when they actually kill the chicken for, selling the meat, and they pump it full of hormones. It's obviously caged. It's tricked into eating, so they have the lights coming on and off, so the chicken sort of just wakes up and thinks it's daytime, then it eats. It's not moving around, and this is again just profit, isn't it? So you can, in 6 weeks, harvest your chicken, but in your regenerative way of farming chickens, it's going to take much longer before you harvest the chicken, isn't it? And it's just down to profit again, I guess.
Absolutely. And, if you want to keep the circle of life going, you let the chickens on a mobile basis. In other words, at night, they do get put into a lockable mobile, because while they're sleeping, we don't want the jackals, or the birds of prey to reduce your flock. So, but by day, they're comfortable because they can see around them, and they're happy to go outside. But the whole point is to follow the path of the cows, because that's when the chickens will be the happiest, because there'll be larvae that develop, there'll be life in the cow dung, and uh, the diet of the chicken will be as God intended. The diet to be. They're not supposed to have a mix of grains, or GMO millies. I mean, that's just not going to result in a good, nutrient dense, tasty hen. And what's really interesting, Deepak, when you go to the fancy bakers in town, these guys that cater for the top 5-star hotels, and they need to bake properly decent products, they'll come in and buy trolleys of our eggs, because it just makes the end product better. So they know when they use the right egg, and the egg is at its premium, and it's got good cell structure, it's going to bake, and it's going to mix with flour in such a way that creates a product that is way superior to standard bread or standard cakes. And that's where the taste is, and that's where you can charge a premium for those people, that can afford it. But the run of the mill, if you're paying 25 cents per egg, you are really 25 cents more on an egg. You are getting yourself one heck of a bargain, and it's a bit like that with chicken. So what they would do with factory farm chicken is they would pump a saline, water, or whatever they do into the chicken to make them heavier, and then they freeze them, and then they sell it to you by kilo. So you're getting a 5 kg bag of frozen thighs and wings, or drums, but in fact, after cooking, you only end up with 1.5 kgs of chicken. So yes, on the chalkboard outside the shop, it looks like it's an absolute bargain per kilo. But when you do the post-cook weight, you're actually paying more than you would if you went into a store and paid for a premium organic pasture-reared bird. And that's where people are being deceived, unfortunately. And so, the mass population are spending a massive part of their salary on food, and it's in many cases devoid of nutrients. And so, that's not great for mankind. And, how do you uh, feed a workforce on nutrient devoid food? And what about early childhood development? Without a proper diet, they're going to be stunted. The word stunting, and it's massive around the world, where you don't have access to a proper diet, and you have to eat GMO maize, for example, and meat once a week, and sprayed spinach, for example. Uh, you know that society is not going to produce the level of engineers or doctors or accountants or creative people or IT specialists that could have been, because they were stunted at birth, and so they cannot reach their optimum, or they cannot maximize themselves. And that's when a whole country or a whole planet would certainly not be producing quality human beings.
So the Yeah, so the eggs is an amazing thing. And that experiment that Gary spoke about, I am going to put it on the screen here so you guys can see it, because I have seen some videos on YouTube. But I wanted to talk about milk and the dairy industry, right? I mean, the dairy industry also has a lot of really bad practices. They also pump the cows full of hormones. They separate the calf from the mother cow. And I mean, what are you looking for good dairy? Because you also sell raw milk in your shops and good milk products.
Well, the first thing we look for is what the retailers of 100 years ago looked for, and that was a nice thick level of cream on top of the milk. That is where the fats are, that is where the good um, probiotics are, that is where the health is, and the nutrients are. If you skim that cream off a bottle of milk and call it full cream when it's definitely not full cream, you are again, tricking the consumer, because the value of milk was always priced based on the inches of cream at the top of that bottle, of each bottle, of each can. Uh, and we've moved away from that, unfortunately. You just don't get that quality milk anymore. So besides not getting a cow that's grazed or raised on a regenerative farm, the buttermilk percent will be low, the nutrients again will be low, and so you're getting something close to white colored water in some instances, especially if you go the low fat route. So dairy's a sad one. I mean, from a quality of life point of view. Again, unfortunately, the shareholders and the accountants rule the roost, and they will milk every last drop out of a cow, maybe 11 liters a day. But on a regenerative farm, around about 7 liters is the comfortable amount, without causing stress to the animal, without causing mastitis and a whole bunch of other things that I don't really understand. But the farmers try and explain to me, exactly what's happening and why over milking isn't a great idea. So yeah, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. And boiling milk to over 80 degrees Celsius pretty much boils the goodness away, and all that is really alive, and all the bacteria, the good bacteria in those milks that you're missing out on, because it's a pasteurized product. So even on our pasteurized milks, we bring it right down, and we try and go at about 58 degrees Celsius, which does its job. And then obviously we have the raw milk as well, which is one of the most nutrient dense things that you can drink. So if you ate um, pasture red eggs, grass fed beef, and pasture outdoor red cows, milk from cows, and you ate a variety of green leafy vegetables, and you ate that for 100 years, that human would still be alive. There's no question. As long as they did exercise, and as long as they didn't get into alcohol and smoking and drinking and whatever, and they had a good balanced life, 100 is an easy milestone to surpass.
So, just from my understanding, why are we pasteurizing our milk? Is it to make it last longer? I mean, I know Louis Pasteur came up with this whole method and they've put out all this marketing and propaganda about pasteurized milk is better. But is it really just to increase the shelf life, or is there something more to pasteurizing?
I think there's a fear, about the health of animals that come out of confined farming practices, and so they were not comfortable that the milk would be actually high quality because of the standard or the environment that the cow was growing up in, and so by pasteurizing it, it was a fail-safe napalm kind of approach, which made sure that there were no lawsuits for people getting ill on bad quality milk. I mean, that's my take on it. Um, it was kind of weighed up by the accountants and was almost like an insurance policy. Let's just make sure no one gets sick. But you shouldn't be saying that. You should be, let's make sure everybody gets healthy, and then having certain checks and balances, which a farmer would do in any case to make sure cow's milk is safe. But so far, there have been very, very few human beings since the beginning of time that have got ill on milk that's not pasteurized.
Very interesting. So let's talk about multi-crop farming for a bit, because when I go look at crop farmers, they've got a single crop, they've got multiple hectares, one pivot system to water this place. You sometimes see the aeroplanes flying over low and just dumping the pesticide. They buy a huge amount of fertilizers. Like, how can we get away from that? I know you sort of touched on the multi-crop, but is it actually possible for farmers to start doing multi-crop farming, like growing a variety of crops on the same piece of land to harvest?
So I think the first thing to say is that there's a massive demand for food um, in every part of the world, and we, that we need to produce the most amount of food that we can for the lowest cost, even if it means spraying, even if it means growing the same thing on the same piece of land, because you'll just add synthetic or chemical fertilizer and the thing will grow in any case. So, it's all about the evil rand per kilo, um, and not the nutrient per kilo debate. Uh, so on a large scale, a farmer will get an order which is massive. He works out his sums and he says, I can make a profit, even though I'm doing it at scale. The company that's buying my produce is negotiating me right down. But if I carry on going like this, I will just make it. But a lot of farmers today have stopped farming because that method didn't lead them anywhere, and they are struggling the same as they were struggling 20 years ago. Doing monocrop farming. So unfortunately, the best way to live, and we all know this, is in a village, not in a city, because in a village you would have, and when I say a village, I'm talking about an example of a farm in the cradle. It's an area of land that has 100 farmers. Each farmer is growing a multitude of products on their very small holding. We're talking about, half a hectare, quarter hectare, and that's all being distributed out. So to get and to get a whole lot of people, each with a cow or two, a goat, some sheep, some chicken, and they're feeding themselves and their families, but they're also selling their excess into a market. It's just up to people like us to connect those farmers to markets like ours so that we can keep those farmers sustainable. And there's some amazing small farmer projects that are growing. And I guess getting humans to understand that you're not getting the best bang for your buck or return on food investment, by buying mass-produced supermarket food. And you have to question, why is it so cheap? Why is it so cheap? And when you do that, yes, you will get full, but what else will you get? And the lifespan of a human is just shortening, year after year after year, which kind of tells you something, that there's something broken in the system. And it's not something, it's a whole lot of things, that are broken. So it's harder work for a retailer or a wholesaler to buy from 100 farms than it is to have one farm doing soybeans, the other one doing maize, the other one doing this. It just kind of makes their lives simpler. But the soil, if you grow the same thing year after year after year, and you spray it, and it's just becoming more and more nutrient devoid, and you then in the next year have to add more and more fertilizer to make sure you get your yield up. And so, it's a real challenge for humankind, because I'm making it look simple by going the regenerative small farmers route. But it's doable, and we should be eating local, and we should be eating from our local farmers around where we live. There are so many of the small farmers, and they create employment, whereas the big farms don't necessarily create that employment, because they're using tractors and they're using machinery to do the farming. So yeah, it's a conundrum for every country, and I guess as we get densely populated, it becomes tougher and tougher, and there's money to be made in mass production of food, um, and it's just one of those things. So how do we, as a retailer, present food to those people that are woke about health, about gut health, about what it is that you really understand what it feels to be as alert and alive and enthusiastic as your cows and your chickens and your goats. We should be that alert, alive, and enthusiastic. And why do I say this? Is when you go into a regenerative farm, the cows hop, skip, and play. You don't see that on a normal farm. The chickens are happy, and they're really enjoying themselves and roaming around. Goats, sheep's, all the same. So it's about the mental health problems that the world is facing. A lot of it has got to do with your immunity and the nutrient density of your food, but also the quality of your gut lining, because you can get the best food possible, but if your gut is not healthy, you're going to do what a farmed animal does, and that's eat nutrients, but then poo them out and retain nothing because the stomach is unable to. And that's a travesty, um, and a waste of possibly 60 to 70% of a salary pack for a blue collar worker probably goes on food. So we're not doing favors for anybody on this planet at the moment.
So, Gary, I know you do have limited time and it is coming to the end of our show because you've got to rush off to another meeting. But just to close off, in the last podcast we did, you spoke about a company you're working with in America that was developing something like a spectrometer or a spectrograph that could measure the nutrient density of the food. Maybe just talk us about that and then we'll finish off the podcast.
Well, wouldn't that be incredible? And wouldn't that change everything, Deepak? Because you would then buy food based on nutrients, and you would pay a farmer who has 10 out of 10 on his nutrient scale much more than you would for someone on a 5. And any farmer that understands basic cash flow and economics would always then be motivated or incentivized to try and get as close to a 10 on the nutrient density scale, because that will make them much more sustainable, because they will get more per kilo. And that talks to me as a farmer, if I was a farmer, and that would be exciting. But it's not quite there yet. I believe in the very near future, we will have a way that a customer and a retailer at receiving can actually check for pesticide levels, can check for um, any nasties, and also then check for nutrient density. At the moment, the tests are very complicated and expensive. It can be done, but it's not viable yet. But yes, they are plugging away. There are loads of companies in the world who do that. I guess big food wouldn't be too happy with that, because it will result in some of their farmers getting way less than they are at the moment. And that might bang out the society and throw things out. But I think it's a good, nice, transparent way of pricing food. And man, we're looking forward to that day. And you've got to also, Deepak, understand that people are tight budget wise, and you don't have the same amount of disposable income all month, or you don't have much disposable income at all. But at least you're empowering the human being to say, you know what, based on my budget and the amount of money I put aside for food, I can only afford a 5 out of 10 for my family on the nutrient density scale. It's a whole bunch better than doing 1 or 2. And so over time, the knock-on savings from healthcare is huge. The queues will dry up at the hospitals, and the service will be better at the hospitals. From a government point of view, there's such an upside of incentivizing nutrient-dense good food, because it would take away their tax dollars. It would allow them to put all those tax dollars that they're spending on hospitals to something else, like building new homes or villages, or upgrading technology, or giving people free Wi-Fi, or helping schools. I mean, there's so many other places that you could redeploy cash if you could get the average health level higher than it is now. But I guess that's why I make a lousy politician, a lousy accountant, and a lousy lawyer.
But you do make a very good retailer of nutrient dense food. So guys, I am going to leave details to Jackson's Real Food Market below this video. Go check it out. They have wonderful, wonderful farmers that they buy from. Gary spends a lot of effort making sure that the farmers are practicing good farming practices, because at the end of the day, good farming practices means more nutrient dense food, better quality food, which means a better quality life for yourself. Gary, we really appreciate your time. I know you are extremely busy, so thank you so much for taking some time to share your wisdom with us. And till next time, ciao for now.
Thank you, Deepak. Always an absolute pleasure to inform, educate, and share information. So thank you for the opportunity.